Week 17 of the fantasy football season. His running back starts, sits every matchup this week in a crucial Week 17. Dallas Cowboys at the Titans. First game of the week here Thursday night. Ezekiel Elliott, he's been a goal line monster this season for this Dallas Cowboy team in a role where obviously he's not the every down back. Him and Tony Pollard, one of the best 1-2 combos, if not in the league at the running back position. But Tony Pollard, he might not play in this ball game. He's missed practice so far early on in the week. But anyway, if Pollard's playing, he's a start. And if Elliott's playing, he's a start no matter what, obviously, as well. But if Pollard's out, Elliott's going to get an expanded role. And I wouldn't be surprised if he puts up 20-plus fantasy points in this one if he's the full workhorse. Now to Derrick Henry, he's a start each and every week. One of the best running backs still in the game. I know it's a tough matchup on paper. It's the Dallas Cowboys. But when Malik Willis at quarterback, this team's just going to keep running. He's not really a passer of the football. And Derrick Henry, we expect him to have a good ball game. See, he's a start each and every week. And once again next season, most likely a first-rounder in fantasy leagues. Now to the Steelers. At the Ravens, Najee Harris. I know it hasn't been a great season here for him, but he's been a serviceable running back, putting up number 2 running back numbers this season. Even I know many people drafted him in the first, second round of their fantasy leagues, but this week here in a grinded-out ball game, most likely at Baltimore, I think Harris could put up some points and make some plays, and I got him as a start. Now to Jaylen Warren, his backup, he's a sit for me, even though he's been very impressive and one of the better yards per play guys here is Jaylen Warren. He's just not getting enough volume. He's not putting enough fantasy points up, and you really can't trust him where he's a backup and he's only getting 30% of the touches anyway. Now to the Ravens, Dobbins and Gus Edwards. It's pretty much been a split over there. And for the most part, these guys really haven't done much. I know Dobbins came back for a couple weeks and had a decent few games, but these are guys I can't trust in these situations. And it's pretty much a split, like I said. And Gus Edwards, for the most part, if he's not getting a goal line touchdown, he's not really doing much, even though he's a good yards per carry guy. But like I said, you don't really catch the football out of the backfield. So they're both borderline for me. Now to the Saints at the Philadelphia Eagles. Alvin Kamara, he's a start for me. Last week, pretty solid ball game, 19 fantasy points. And I know he hasn't put up huge numbers this season, Kamara, but he's still a serviceable running back. And a guy I have confidence in this one because he could get a lot of dump-off passes at the Philadelphia Eagles if they can't stretch the field, especially if Olave's out. Once again, I'm going to think we're going to see more running game with Taysom Hill, Kamara, and a lot of dump-offs to Kamara as well. Now to Miles Sanders the last few weeks. I know it's been a struggle for him, but now the Eagles are back at home. And Sanders, he's been a better home player than he has been on the road this season. So now to tune him up one last time, he's a number 2 running back this season. I think he could put in solid numbers anywhere from 10-plus fantasy points. And I got him as a start this week versus a mediocre Saint defense. Now to the Bears at the Lions. David Montgomery I have as a start this week. I'm not the biggest David Montgomery guy, but I'm going off the matchup and the touches in this one. So Montgomery last week got off to a good start versus the Bills. And then for whatever reason, they didn't really go back to him much. And the Bills figured him out and got the lead. And then they had to chase points. But anyway, this week at Detroit, I think this could be a close game for a majority of it before Detroit pulls away and takes. And then David Montgomery, he's a mediocre running back. I understand that. But he could run in between the tackles and catch decently out of the backfield. So he's a start for me. And Khalil Herbert, I know he came back from injury, but we haven't seen much from him over the last couple months. We don't know if he's 100%. And then coming into the season, I like Herbert a lot and the work he was doing. But this week here, I can't trust him in a big spot. And he's a sit. Now to DeAndre Swift, he's a start for me. I know the numbers haven't been up to snuff for much this season. Playing through injury pretty much the whole way here is DeAndre Swift. Only missing a couple ball games. But anyway, this week I got him as a start. Detroit back at home. Their offense is more high-powered and more on pace on home. This bad defense really don't stop anyone. So right here, I got DeAndre Swift as a start. Now to Jamal Williams, he's pretty much been a touchdown and nothing. He's not going to catch the ball out of the backfield. Then he's a short yardage and goal line guy. So this week he's borderline. And if you got to start him, you better hope, obviously, he gets a goal line touch or two. Because if they don't get down there that close and they score touchdowns from further away, you're not going to get much out of Jamal Williams. He's a borderline option this week. Now to the Panthers at the Bucs. Donta Foreman and Herbert went off in last week's ball game, but that was versus a weak Detroit Lion run defense where they found something in it. Obviously, was this Carolina Panther team. But this week here, they're both borderline options. They really haven't been putting up numbers besides last week's game. And this could be a ball game where they're chasing points early and often, obviously, is this Carolina Panther team. We know this Buck defense is pretty good against the run. And this week here, it'll be tough to still trust Foreman and Herbert, even though after coming off those monster performances where they both went over 100 yards rushing in that one. Now to Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Leonard Fournette, he had a big ball game, over 20 fantasy points in last week's game at the Arizona Cardinals. So you're going to start him in this one. And Rachaad White, he had a decent game as well in that one with finding the end zone. But Leonard Fournette, he took the reins over more. But White's still going to get mixed in. He's still going to get some third down work. And he's the better receiver, in my opinion, out of the backfield. So I like both Buck running backs in this one as starts this week. Now to the Broncos at the Kansas City Chiefs with Latavius Murray. He's been a solid running back, believe it or not, this season here for this Denver Bronco team. At least making plays in the backfield, physical running back. And he's a guy, once he's within the 5-yard line, he's money in the bank of punching it in. But right now in a tough matchup where they're going to be trailing points, and Murray's best days as a wide receiver out of the backfield, catching the football or behind him. He's a borderline option. And Marlon Mack last week, he didn't do much. I know the 2 previous weeks he had good ball games, but this week he's a sit. Now to the Chiefs, McKinnon and Pacheco. It's been a solid 1-2 combo. And over the last month of the season, Jared McKinnon's been a top 5 fantasy back in terms of fantasy points. So right here, he's making big plays out of the backfield, catching the football. He's even got some goal line stampers as well, where you figure Pacheco would have been the man in that situation. But McKinnon's been the gadget guy, second best wide receiver over the last few weeks on this team. And he's not even running that much through the tackles, and he's still putting in these fantasy numbers here, just receiving more than anything. And Pacheco, physical running back, he runs for every yard, he earns every yard. And this week here versus the Denver Broncos, I think he could put up anywhere from 12 to 15 fantasy points. And he's a solid number 2 running back this week. Now to the Colts at the Giants. Deion Jackson, I thought he was going to get more involved in that ball game. He really didn't do much on Monday Night Football. And Zach Moss got the bulk of the work. But he's not really a guy who could catch the ball out of the backfield. So this week here versus a pretty decent Giant defense, it'll be tough to trust both these guys in this one as must start. So they're borderline options at best to me in this one. Now to Saquon Barkley. What could you say? Saquon Barkley, a lot of people thought it was going to be another bad year for him with injuries, but he made it this far in fantasy football, and he's been a top 5, top 6 running back the whole season. So this week here in a matchup where they're vulnerable against the run, Indianapolis, we just saw Austin Eckler tear him up. Saquon Barkley, he's a must start. And next season, he's going to be a guy once again, late first, early second round. Now to the Jags at the Houston Texans. Travis Etienne, I know he hasn't been all that great over the last few games here. A couple pop games a few weeks ago, then he struggled a little bit. But right here in a good matchup with the Houston Texans that gets shredded on the ground, he's a no-brainer start this week is Etienne. And this Jaguar team, they're exciting to watch. A lot of young guys and a team just coming together and might sneak into the playoffs here from this weak division. Now to the Texans, Rex Burkhead and Freeman, the 2 backs over there. I know Burkhead scored a touchdown last week, but it was on a fumble recovery in the end zone here. And Royce Freeman, I know, got 16 carries, but he really didn't do much with him in that ball game. So right here, you can't trust anyone on Houston. They've been a struggling offense all season, but I'll give them credit where credit is due. A lot of close ball games over the last few weeks here, and even winning last week, 19-14 at the Tennessee Titans. But either way, they're both sits for me. Now to the Cardinals at the Falcons. James Conner, he's been a solid running back once again this season, even with the quarterback problems of this Arizona Cardinal team. He's overcome them, and he's put in some decent fantasy games. So as a solid number 2 running back versus a pretty weak Atlanta Falcon defense, he's a must-start this week. Here's Conner. Now to Tyler Algier. The last few weeks, he's taken the reins by storm, and he's been a solid running back for this Atlanta Falcon team, and one of the better rookies at running back as well this season. So this week, I'm going to give him a start. Cardinal defense not good versus the run. We saw Fournette and Rachaad White go over 35 fantasy points combined last week here. And I think Tyler Algier could have another good game. And Cordell Patterson, his work's been cut back. We know he was injured for a decent part of the season here. And now this Falcon team, it's all about the young guys and seeing what they could do over the next couple weeks. So Algier's going to get the start. Patterson's going to get the sit. And pretty much Patterson, if he don't score a touchdown over the last few weeks here, he's not really doing anything anyway for fantasy owners. So he's a sit this week. Now to the next game, Browns at the Commanders. Nick Chubb, you start him each and every week. I know this team's been a pass-first team now all of a sudden since Watson's come back. And Nick Chubb, his numbers are definitely taking a hit, but if you came this far with Nick Chubb, you're going to ride it out with him one more time. And I think he could do damage, obviously, at this Commander team. The only thing with Chubb the knock is he don't catch the football out of the backfield. Now to Kareem Hunt, he's been a non-factor this season in fantasy football. He's a free agent after the season. And a new team is where he's going to get his value back. If he's going to be a starter for a new team next season is Hunt, because I don't think the Browns bring him back. Going to be a little bit overpriced, but this season the numbers haven't been there, the playing time hasn't been there, and he's a sit this week. Now to the Commanders, Gibson and Brian Robinson, both borderline options. They're hit or miss running backs for the most part, and it's got to do with game flow. So Carson Wentz possibly could be back as a starter in this one after Taylor Heineke the last few weeks here has really struggled and not gotten anything going. So Robinson, we know, short yardage, physical back, and Gibson more wide receiver out of the backfield. But this week here, I don't have a lot of confidence in these guys, and they're borderline best. Now to the Dolphins at the New England Patriots, Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson Jr., they're going to be sits for me here. I think, obviously, if Tua is out of this game, Bill Belichick's going to do what he does best. He's going to take out the running game, and then he's going to take out one of Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle in this one, and then make Teddy Bridgewater or Skylar Thompson try to beat him. So Jeff Wilson, he came back last week, had a decent couple pop runs. Raheem Mostert, he really didn't do much in that game. And now with Tua not there, like the Patriots are going to stack the box in this one here and have Bridgewater with Thompson try to beat him. So they're both sits for me. And now to the Patriots from Andre Stevenson. It's been a monster season for him. And for his sake, I hope next season and fantasy owners' sakes, he's the number one guy undisputed. And Damian Harris, he don't eat into his workload. So this week here versus a Dolphin defense that really don't stop much on the ground here, I got Stevenson as a start. Now to the Jets, going all the way out to Seattle. Zonovan Knight, he came onto the scene a few weeks ago with 3 double-digit fantasy games in a row. And now the last 2 weeks here, he's a guy that's done nothing. He's not a guy that's playable, especially versus the 12th man in Seattle, even though I know the defense isn't that great here. But how could you trust Zonovan Knight after the last couple weeks here, not doing much and only 2.5 fantasy points last week? In terms of Michael Carter, pretty much the same thing as well. I know he's probably a better wide receiver out of the backfield here, but this Jet offense is a mess. They don't know who they're going with the quarterback. Offensive line is banged up as well. And the running backs really haven't done nothing over the last few weeks. So they're both sits for me. And Kenneth Walker, you know how I feel about him. He's one of the better running backs in the league. And next season, probably a second, third round pick in fantasy leagues. He's got breakaway speed. He can catch the ball out of the backfield a little bit. I know the matchup isn't the greatest versus the Jets, but I still got Walker matchup proof and a start this week. Now to the 49ers at the Las Vegas Raiders. Not much to say. Christian McCaffrey is a start each and every week. I know last week only 13 fantasy points here for McCaffrey, which is a bummer from him compared to other players, but he's a guy that'll get back on track, and I think he has a big ball game this week. Now to the Raiders, Josh Jacobs leads the league in fantasy points at the running back position. I know last week only 6 fantasy points for Jacobs, but this one I think they'll make him more of the vocal point. The weather was bad over there in Pittsburgh. The wind was swirling, but for whatever reason, they weren't feeding Jacobs in that ball game. But this week, they're going to feed him a whole lot, even if they're trailing, I think, early and often here. And they're back home as well, so I got Josh Jacobs as a start this week. To the Minnesota Vikings at the Packers, Dalvin Cook. I know it hasn't been the greatest of years. I know he probably hasn't lived up to first-round running back tag here, is Cook, but he's still a solid back. Good career at the Green Bay Packers, and you're starting him each and every week. Anyway, now to the Packers, Aaron Jones. He's had a couple monster games and a couple games where he didn't show up this season, and this week they're going to need him to show up, is Green Bay, if they want to knock the Vikings off and really have a chance for the playoffs. Aaron Jones, he plays good in big games, and this week here in a big ball game in a cold Lambeau Field, most likely, I think he comes through when he's a starter. Now A.J. Dillon, he's been up and down this season here, but for the most part, the last few weeks here, he's been playing good football, but he's still a running back. I really don't have 100% confidence in him, and he's borderline to me. Now to the Rams at the Chargers. I know Cam Akers went off with over 30 fantasy points in last week's ball game, and that's tough to say because I think the Rams are going to come out with the same formula once again. Play good defense, get their offense in better position, and just keep running the football. And that's exactly what they did with Cam Akers in last week's 51-14 victory. So right here, Akers, I got him as a start. This Charger defense ain't all that great versus the run, and I think Akers could at least make a few plays. And after coming off a big game like that, I got him as start. Now to Austin Ekeler, what could you say? He's a top 3 pick, most likely once again next season. He could do it all, catch the ball out of the backfield, 100 receptions on the season, running between the tackles, and punching those goal line works as well. So this week here, versus a banged-up Ram team, I think he has a good ball game, and he's obviously a must-start. And now the last game of the week, Bills at Bengals, Monday Night Football. I'm starting both the running backs. Both these guys are doing work. James Cook, you don't need a lot of carries to put up double-digit fantasy points, is what I learned over the last few weeks here. And this week, it's a good matchup at the Cincinnati Bengals. So both running backs I have confidence in, because they could do a little bit of both, catching the ball out of the backfield and breaking one off for a touchdown as well. So they're both starts. And Joe Mixon, he's a start for me. It's a conservative play. I know this Bills defense is tough. They stop a lot of run game. But Joe Mixon's still a guy that has the ability to pop off at any time as well. So that's what running backs start sits every matchup of Week 17 of the fantasy football season.